I used to be quite miserable, but thanks to the 80-20 rule, I'm living a much more fulfilling and happier life right now. This simple principle, also known as the Pareto Principle, has transformed not just my wardrobe, but also how I approach every aspect of my life. From my finances to productivity to self-care, applying the 80-20 rule has made such a massive difference. So grab a cup of tea, get comfy, and let's dive into how this 80-20 rule can change your life as well. First, a quick refresher on what the 80-20 rule actually is. This rule suggests that 80% of our results come from just 20% of our efforts. This principle was first discovered in economics, but since then it has been applied to so many areas, from business to personal life. Basically, it's about identifying and focusing on what actually makes a difference. When I first heard about it, I thought, okay, that sounds interesting, but I didn't realize how impactful it could be until I started applying it in different ways. My journey with the 80-20 rule started with my closet. In fact, I heard about the 80-20 rule when I first came across minimalism because a lot of people follow this principle when they're trying to downsize their wardrobe. So I thought I'll give it a try as well. At that point, I was shopping a lot, and in order to sustain my shopping habit, I was working a lot as well. So it wasn't a good situation for me. What more, I was really overwhelmed by a closet full of clothes and bags, but yet I always felt like I had nothing to wear. And so when I realized that I was wearing 20% of my closet 80% of the time, I decided to declutter and focus on the pieces that I truly loved and wore often. And the impact was immediate and life-changing. I felt so much lighter, I became a lot more organized, and my mornings became so much simpler. On top of that, my shopping went down by a lot, and I'm talking 60% or more, because I was no longer buying things that I didn't need or like. But it didn't stop there. I started thinking, what else am I putting in a lot of efforts but getting minimal or no results? And so I started applying the 80-20 rule to my finances as well. I looked at my spending and realized that a significant portion of my expenses came from mindless shopping. And when I say shopping, I'm referring to all the expenses that come with it as well. For example, in the past, I used to love going to the shopping malls on the weekends. Often, I had nothing to buy, but I would walk around all day looking for something to buy. I remember there was one time we parked our car in quite an expensive car park, and at the end of the day, I had bought nothing, but we had to pay $60 just for the parking. And of course, whenever I did buy something, my expenses would be even higher. So just by cutting down on shopping, I managed to save a lot more money. Applying the 80-20 rule to my finances was a massive turning point in my life, because that was when I realized I didn't actually have to work myself to the ground to live a happy life. On top of that, because I wasn't spending as much, it really expedited my journey to achieving my financial goals. And so after reaching a certain milestone, I decided to go on a year-long career break, and I'm now working part-time. Honestly, some days I still cannot believe how things have changed for me. And then I took it further into my work life. As a healthcare professional, I used to aspire to become someone who could do everything. By that I mean, I wanted to do all kinds of treatment. But later I realized, if I tried to do everything, I couldn't do anything well. The logic is simple. For anyone to be good at something, you need to do a lot of it, and that requires time. So in the last several years, I've been focusing on what I truly enjoy, and for whatever that I don't, I refer them to my very capable colleagues who specialize in those areas. And I'll tell you, work life has become a lot less stressful. And as you already know, I have a YouTube channel. Now, when you're on social media, it's so easy to feel like you want to do everything. At one point, I was considering to post on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and you name it. But later, I realized I only have so much time in a day, and so I shouldn't set unrealistic goals. From there, I decided to focus on making YouTube videos and engaging with my audience, mainly through this channel. And here is where it gets really interesting because the 80-20 rule changed the way I looked at everything. I began to see that in every area of life, there are a few key things that bring me the most values and joy. Let's talk about productivity and time management. Now, I've mentioned a few times on this channel that I'm quite obsessed with being productive. I've gotten a lot better over the years, but I also understand it's something I'll always have to work on. In the past, I always felt like I should be doing something because otherwise it's a waste of my time. But with the 80-20 rule, I started to look at things very differently. I now prioritize on completing the important tasks rather than being obsessed over being busy just for the sake of it. This means I now focus on the most impactful tasks each day. Every day, I'll ask myself, what are the 1 to 2 things that I can do today that will make the biggest difference? And I work as a dentist part-time, so on those days, my priority is to provide quality care. So as long as I've done that, I'm happy and I can allow myself to take it easy for the rest of the day. And when I'm not doing healthcare, my priorities are to work on my illustrations and come up with video ideas. Some days it can also be filming a video or taking online courses to improve myself. It really depends on the daily goals I set for myself. Whatever the important tasks are, as long as I've done them, I am allowed to relax without feeling guilty. This simple shift has actually made me a lot more productive because I find that I can focus so much better on the one thing I'm working on. Let's talk about relationships. I applied the 80-20 rule to my relationships as well. I realized 80% of my happiness comes from a few key relationships with my family, very close friends, and supportive colleagues. And so I decided to spend more time nurturing those connections rather than spreading myself too thin by going to social events that I don't even care about or trying to please people who don't actually want to be in my circle. When it comes to relationship, quality is always more important than quantity. Moving on to my well-beings, when it came to self-care, I realized I was spending too much time on things that were not really nourishing me. For example, I used to love scrolling on Instagram for hours on end, only to feel like I wasn't good enough or I didn't have enough. I also used to watch a lot of TV shows, which I didn't really enjoy to be honest, but I watched them anyway because there was nothing else to do. Whereas now, I have a small selection of self-care practices that bring me back to life. For example, reading, journaling, doing illustrations, yoga, and daily exercises. Now, because I know what works for me, I can actually take good care of myself after a long day of work rather than draining myself further with pointless activities. The 80-20 rule taught me that it's okay to focus on the few things that matter the most and let go of the rest. And honestly, it's been life-changing. So how can you apply the 80-20 rule to your life? Here are some practical tips to get you started. The first step is to identify the high-impact areas in your life. Look at the different areas of your life. For example, your work, your finances, your wardrobe, or your relationship. And then ask yourself, what are the 20% that brings 80% of the results or happiness? Or similarly, what are the 20% that brings 80% of your stress and misery? Start there. Step 2 is to audit your time. Take a week to track your time and see where it goes. You might find that a lot of your time is spent on low-impact activities. For me, this could be constantly refreshing and replying to emails rather than sitting down to work on my illustrations or film a YouTube video. Try to cut down on those low-impact activities and focus on things that will actually make a difference in the long run. Step 3 is to declutter regularly. Whether if it's your wardrobe, your kitchen, your schedule, or your expenses, make it a habit to declutter on a regular basis and remove whatever that isn't adding values to your life. Step 4 is to set very clear priorities. Determine what your core values are and let them guide your decisions. When you're clear about your priorities, it's so easy to cut out the noise. For me, my priorities now are to focus on my well-being, be available for my family, be of service to others without burning myself out, travel and experience the world, and work on my illustrations. So with everything I do and every decision I make, I'm simply letting my priorities guide my actions. Step 5 is to experiment and reflect. Remember, this is a journey, so try to experiment with applying the 80-20 rule to different areas in your life and adjust as needed. For example, at one point, I was seriously contemplating about being a hardcore minimalist. I even thought about moving to a tiny home, but I now know that I don't have to do things the extreme way to enjoy the benefits of minimalism. Applying the 80-20 rule has truly changed my life, and I hope these tips inspire you to try it out as well. Remember, it's not about perfection, but about focusing on what truly matters. Have you tried the 80-20 rule yourself? If so, how did it change your life? Please drop your thoughts down below in the comments. That's it from me today. Take care, and I will see you soon.